Coming to you live from the home of the Sanderson sisters. It's the Movie Change Up podcast, our Disney Plus weekly review, where each week we break down what came out this week on Disney Plus. It's kind of a self-explanatory title, which is why my genius brain came up with it. As always, I am your host, Joe Fricke, brought to you with my co-host, Tristan Mayer, who joins me along as we break down this week in Disney Plus. Tristan, what are your thoughts on Disney Plus's releases this week?
Yeah, I think you stumbled a bit the intro there, Joe, but it's okay. You didn't get
We've
enough
done this
sleep.
for like 3 months. We'll figure it out. I just woke up from a nap, so.
Yeah, we'll get there eventually. But yeah, I feel that's the same way about Disney Plus. Honestly, we'll get there eventually. Right now, we're in kind of that gap week. We're building up towards Hawkeye, building up towards some big drops. But this felt like one of the filler weeks for me. That being said, there were a couple good surprises here, and I think you did a good pick. You pulled out so weird as I talk about our kind of deep dive talk for the episode. So I think it was a great fit for what we're talking about this week, and we had some nice surprises. We from to have the discussion. We're getting into some horror topics finally, Joe. It feels like a horror episode here on Disney Plus.
Yeah, it was kind of interesting because last week we had like a bunch of like documentary type shows and like documentary topics, and this week we're going straight into Halloween, straight into like that theme. Speaking of Halloween, let's start with probably one of the things I've been most surprised by in all of Disney Plus so far. Show I really had zero expectations for, and that is Just Beyond, based on the R.L. Stine series of the same name. I think it's kind of just generally based on his works, but I think Just Beyond is their main inspiration. And I had a thing.
Tune into Jar Jar somehow.
Uh,
You've
my
become
camera,
things.
my camera became unplugged, which is always great, but people can still hear me. And I'm
Just
just gonna keep
Beyond, I didn't have
talking.
much familiarity
Yeah.
with the source material or anything like that because I knew obviously Goosebumps from R.L. Stine. That was a big thing from my childhood, picking up at scholastic book fairs and stuff like that. And Fear Street was one I read a handful of those as well. That was a Netflix adaptation of another R.L. Stine series. So he has a few of those out there that are kind of in the same vein of Goosebumps, but going for a
Yeah.
different demographic. And this is exactly what this feels like to me. The premise is very similar to Goosebumps. It's like an anthology type series where each episode has totally different characters, totally different story, different setting, and it engages in like these sci-fi horror themes. This series is much more towards the sci-fi than the horror, at least comparatively to Goosebumps, but there is definitely horror in this too. So it was fun to see them kind of bridging both of those styles together, and it felt like a really fun throwback for me to like those classic shows like Goosebumps, like Are You Afraid of the Dark? Those kind of '90s shows that were right in the same vein. So for me, it was a nice, fun throwback. Like you said, I had no idea this even coming out really, and then it was a good surprise for me. So yeah, you said you were surprised by it too, Joe. If you're ready to talk about it, I want to hear your thoughts.
Yeah, I don't know what's going on with my camera, but my audio is still working, and this is mainly a podcast show, so I'll try and figure it out while I'm talking. But yeah, mainly that. Going into it, I was expecting more of like a Wizards of Waverly Place type of tone. I expected it to be super, super lighthearted, not really much when it comes to scares. Expected it more to be for like a 8 to 12 year old audience, and I was pleasantly surprised by how dark it was. I'll be honest, I only watched the first four. I know you watched the entire series, and the very first episode is what shocked me the most. I saw like Nassim Pedrad was like the main villain, and if you don't know who she is, she was on SN. She was a SNL cast member from 2009 to 2014. I've never really seen her in anything serious. The most serious role I've seen her in is like Jasmine's handmaiden in the live action Aladdin movie. So when I saw she was basically going to be like the main antagonist, I'm like, this is going to be like a joke of a show, and maybe it'll be a funny kind of lighthearted show. But she was legit terrifying in the role, and I'm kind of intrigued to see her in other things beyond this because I've never really seen her do anything that isn't comedy. But yeah, that first episode, if you haven't seen the show, they're basically turning these young girls into essentially like a Stepford Wives situation with like a brainwashing thing, and I can't remember who's the main girl is? What's
It's McKenna Grace. She
McKenna
plays
Grace?
kind of
Yep.
this like teenage rebel character that gets brought into a boarding school to be kind of straightened
Yep.
up. You know, she's going to a middle school and she's like the problem school problem child there. She's kind of the rebel, the punk. You know, she's more talking about activist kind of things rather than school. And then her
Yep.
parents send her to this boarding school that becomes increasingly obvious that there's something more than just a school here.
Yeah. So yeah, they turn her into a Stepford, or they attempt to turn her into a Stepford Wives situation, and that's kind of the whole deal. And I thought it was like that whole episode. I was like, wow, this show is actually going to be good. Like darker than I expected, well written, better performances than I expected. And then going into the second episode is kind of more where it was closer to the tone. I was imagining in that episode, I believe it's called Parents Are From Mars, Kids Are From Venus. And if you've seen the movie Unhinged, the Russell Crowe movie that just came out this year, the kid from that movie is kind of the main actor in this episode. And then you also Henry Thomas, who most people will know from E.T., and then obviously you have the Haunting of Hill House, and he's just most recently in Midnight Mass, as in this episode as well, as kind of this, local crazy guy who has all of these conspiracy theories. But these two kids, whose parents are best friends with each other, uh, realize that their parents are aliens, and it's kind of their whole reaction to that. And that's more the tone of what I thought this whole show was going to be. Kind of this lighthearted, kind of with a light horror element. But that episode was still like somewhat dark, and that was the lightest of the four episodes I saw. What were your thoughts on the second episode?
Yeah, I think you mentioned the first episode is dark and it has McKenna Grace, who's like really breaking out star right now. So they definitely led with like the known face from the beginning, and for the second episode, definitely a step towards the goofiness. But I didn't think it got too goofy. I think throughout the rest of this season, it for me walks that line of not being too childish, but of course not being too dark. And yeah, I think it has a balance there. And the second episode you said is a bit more towards the camp of it all, but I think this feels way less cheesy than Goosebumps did. You know, I thought this was going to be more into the Goosebumps vein of just like really goofy and very kiddie, and this is not that. I have to imagine that this was similar to Fear Street. It was R.L. Stein trying to go for like a slightly older demographic, and this is going for like a slightly older demographic. So I think people who are in their teens are definitely going to love this. But I think also if you're even a bit older than that, towards our age group, and you have some nostalgia for like those '80s, '90s cartoons or horror kind of shows, they're in the same vein of those in terms of their tone and how serious you take it.
Yeah, if I was, 13, 14 years old when this show dropped out, like if this had came out on Disney Channel, or I guess Disney XD is where this show would have released when I was age appropriate for it. It would have been my favorite show. I would have been like, this is amazing, this is awesome. I was a fan of Twilight Zone growing up. I would have thought this was like the greatest show of all time.
Yeah, I watched Goosebumps a lot growing up, like I said, so this would have been right in my vein. And even as an adult, I feel like I'm a child at heart still.
Yeah,
So I still had a good time with this,
yeah,
even though it definitely feels very YA.
yeah. So I only saw the first four, and I would say of the first four, my favorite episode is probably the fourth one of this girl that's kind of haunted by this slender man looking figure. But for you, what would be your favorite of all of the episodes?
I thought that the finale, the treehouse, was really interesting. It deals with a teenager who's lost someone in his life, and he finds a treehouse that kind of connects him to an alternate universe where that person did not die,
Yeah.
and he kind of has this choice to make for what is he going to do, where is he going to go, essentially. And that was a really interesting. I thought I also liked the one Unfiltered. I think it was the fifth episode. It dealt with kind of a haunted Instagram style app where she's taking beauty pictures of herself that make her look gorgeous, everything she wants to look like, but it has these kind of haunting consequences in her actual personal life. So I thought it was interesting to have a kid show that deals with these real themes. Like I
Yeah.
think even just in the last couple of weeks, we've heard a lot about like the impact that social media is having on young girls around this exact demographic and this age. So I thought it was really nice to see the Unfiltered episode come out as it did today, where it's like, okay, this is very much timely with stuff that kids are actually dealing with right now, and it doesn't feel like adults talking down to kids, you know.
Yeah, I was actually gonna bring that up. That I think a lot of these episodes, while being good and dark and scary, do have messages that fit the demographic they're going for, and I mean even messages that are good for anybody. Like I think the first episode deals a lot with being yourself and don't just conform and doing the right thing. The second episode, I think is more. I don't really know if there's themes in that second episode, other than maybe your parents might look like dorks and they might kind of be weird, but they're still, for the most part, your parents, I guess, and like they're looking out for you, I guess. But even some people still have shitty parents, which isn't really in that episode. So I guess the theme isn't as strong there. And then the third episode, I feel like lightly touches on racism and things like that, and people that are different shouldn't be treated differently. And then the fourth episode, I think, was a lot of about overcoming your fears. It was
Mm-hmm.
definitely a lot about overcoming your fears and being brave and that whole ordeal.
Yeah, I think it very much fits in theme with if you are familiar with the stuff of that era. It feels like a throwback to that kind of thing
Yeah,
where you definitely have the heart of the message, what you're trying to get. And I also want to mention too that it's a true anthology. It's not like What If, where all of a sudden at
yeah,
the end it all comes together and all the characters cross over. Like
yeah,
this is a genuine anthology where every actor comes and goes, every character comes and goes. You're not going to see McKenna Grace showing up in every other episode. There's some crossover material, at least not in first season. You know, maybe season two we'll get some sequel territory or something like that. But as of now, they're all genuine, standalone, beginning, middle, end stories.
yeah. And one final thing, unless you have more to say, is the thing I'm really appreciating about Disney Plus is I feel like Walt Disney, as far as like Disney goes, he wanted it to be like family entertainment, like entertainment for the whole family as far as like the Disney product. And I felt like to a degree, a lot of the Disney content, whether it's movies or stuff on television, was going more towards like kids and being directly aimed at kids, where I feel like a lot of the content on Disney Plus, sure, you're going to have some of your content, a lot of your Mickey Mouse based content that's, directly aimed at young kids, but I feel like pretty much all of their live action content is family content, whether it's Just Beyond, Doogie, Kamealoha, uh, all of their Marvel and Star Wars shows, the High School Musical, the series. Like I do like that. Pretty much all of their live action content is what I would consider family content, where parents can watch it and not want to just pull their eyes out with a heated spoon.
Yeah, and I like that there's kind of a range too. Like this is definitely leaning more towards like the older teen demographic, you know, and they also have the Mickey Mouse cartoons that are going way more
Yeah,
towards the young demographic, and then you would have Star Wars that goes a little bit towards the older demographic. But so I think I love that you said the family entertainment. I think that's what Disney Plus is really managing to do. You have something for everybody, even if like this might not be for everyone, but it's going to be for somebody in the family, you know.
yeah.
And I think they have a good job of kind of touching every touchstone.
Yeah, and I would say for as as far as the horror aspect of it goes, I really wouldn't show this to anyone under maybe 12, because there were some aspects where even me as a 28-year-old was like, this is a scary moment. Like, this is honestly when the Henry Tom after watching the first episode, when Henry Thomas showed up in the second episode, I double checked to see like, oh, I wonder if like they got Mike Flanagan to direct an episode of this.
Mm-hmm.
Uh,
Yeah, I think it. I would not show it to like a young kid, but I would be like, this is not gonna scare you. Like if you're a person who's like, oh, I don't like horror, this is not gonna be
no,
like
no.
terrifying to you.
But if you're 8, you would be legit. The fourth episode would legit give you nightmares.
And I think this is a great entry level into horror. I
Yeah.
think I want to point that out before we move on to the next.
Yep.
We have another show we're going to talk about that I think is for me an entry level horror for me personally, and like this feels kind of hand in hand with So Weird, which we're going to be talking about in a bit. This kind of in a way feels like a spiritual
Yeah.
successor to that, in the way it's handling its tone and its themes, and it's kind of going into these sci-fi concepts.
Yep.
So I think if you have a kid who you want to get into horror or get into sci-fi and you're not quite sure where to start, you know, you don't go and show them Halloween Kills. You're gonna be like, okay, let's watch Just Beyond and see what he gets a
Yeah.
feel for.
Yep.
And you have all the genres. You have like ghosts. You have multiple realities. You have like haunted masked monsters and like a genuine slasher. And I think you can cover all the genres of horror here. So it's a nice kind of like beginner's guide to horror, I think.
All right, and you ready for our next show?
I'm ready.
Our next show is one we've been talking about for a while here. It's a show I think you and I are both big fans of, or, as far as what it is, fans of, and that is Doogie Kamealoha M.D. This episode was titled Career Babes, and basically there's the two main plots of this episode. The one, and obviously if you haven't been watching our show, the show is a reboot of Doogie Howser, but this time it's about a female teen doctor who lives in Hawaii, and this is a show that exists in a world where Doogie Howser was a show on television, and that's how she got her nickname, as she was nicknamed after, the Neil Patrick Harris show. And basically, the plot of this episode is Doogie, or Lahela, as she's mainly called in the show, her real name, is kind of caught between two worlds. She's a teenager, she's a 16-year-old girl, but she's seen as like not really part of her peer group. She has her one friend, but since she doesn't actually go to high school, she has no real high school friends, and she doesn't go to high school parties. She's not invited to high school parties. But then where she works at the hospital, she's seen as a 16-year-old girl, so she's not invited to like the after work parties or the after work functions. And so she's kind of caught between these two things and trying to figure out her place and where she belongs. And then the other plot is around her younger brother, who's supposed to take his SATs, but he doesn't really feel like college and that path is for him. And so he's off to explore his own path, and he realizes he wants to be a farmer. And he finds this organic farm that he really loves working at, and it's, bringing out sides of him that his parents never seen before. And Tristan, what were your thoughts on this episode?
This is perfect comfort TV, Joe. Like this is you mentioned that we're really like kind of impressed by this, and it's been a nice week to week coverage. And yeah, for me, it's nice. It's a comfort show. I come on every week. I get to sit down and like be with this family that is all kind of getting along. And like there's problems here and there. Like they're not plotless, but I in the end it was nice to see like he it wasn't. I saw the premise, not thought, oh, he gets this new interest and it's something that troubles his parents. Not that, oh no, it's gonna be like he gets into this thing that breaks his person. They have to like have an intervention and tell him about how he's doing this terrible thing. But no, it was like, oh, he's found this new passion they weren't expecting him to have, And I think this is a nice show to come and watch. And we mentioned how this is like a family entertainment network, and I think this is nice comfort for the whole family. You get together, kind of everyone have their favorite characters, and there's moments where I would watch it and I think, oh, that's kind of like what my dad would do, or oh, that's kind of like what my mom would do, and I imagine if you had a whole family together, you'd all be poking fun at each other, saying, "Oh, Dad, that's exactly like you." So this has been just a nice watch. There's not much new to say about it because it's as good as it always is every week. But
Yeah.
I'm liking it.
So I messaged you a couple days, or I messaged you, I believe, yesterday or the day before, that I had a hot take. I was coming in with a hot take that's a different take than what I've normally had, and it's regarding this show is what the take is. And I will say we've been talking about the balance of this show, how it perfectly balances like kid aspects and parent aspects, and I will say this is the first time that I felt the show wasn't in balance, and that this was a definite. To me, it felt more of a kid aimed episode, a child aimed episode. And that if this was the tone of maybe like the first two episodes, I probably wouldn't have made it to episode 3. There were just times where they were doing like TikTok dances and her talking to like the cheerleaders and like this slang and all of that, where I was just like, I can feel that this is not made for me. And that was the first time watching the show where I felt that.
It's interesting, Joe, because you do wonder like if they came out hard for the first couple episodes and then they kind of start dropping it after, And I didn't necessarily feel that here. I did feel like
There were
her
moments.
storyline is definitely going towards
Yeah.
the kid angle, and I think with this kind of a show, I was kind of prepared for it to kind of weave it and out between like, oh, here's a
Yeah.
couple kid episodes. We've covered the Clone Wars, and
Yeah.
I'm used to that where it's like suddenly we're gonna have 3 or 4 episodes that are just absolutely not for you at all, and that's just kind of part of
Yeah.
it. And so
Yeah.
maybe I
Like,
didn't really notice the tone shift as much.
yeah, I'll definitely be back next week 100% watching the show, but this, and if it goes back to like the balance that it's had, it's like, oh, they had a little bit of a down episode, like that's fine. But I still enjoyed the brothers storyline, and I still enjoyed parts of Lahela's storyline. It was just there were just a couple moments here and there where I was just like felt that this show is not made for me.
Yeah, and the brother has been kind of a sideline character
Yeah.
for a lot of this. So this is kind of one of the first episodes he's been kind of brought to the forefront and given a storyline for himself. So I wonder if he's kind of going to be like the chopper of this series, where it's like, oh, he gets his episode once in a while, where it's like, here's the one for the kids type thing. Because
Yeah.
for me, I've really attached to the kind of like the hospital drama kind of side of this, where it's like, oh, this new guy's coming in the previous episodes, and then like the mom is trying to balance the work life balance, and so is the main character. And this one stepped a lot away from that and just became about like the teen life. And I think that was kind of a missed opportunity for them. Like this has always been about the balance of the teen life and then also the hospital life and how does she kind of find the middle ground. And this one felt like it was much more about the teen life and much more about like yeah, like the TikTok references and the slang words, and that's the kind of stuff where I feel like I don't know, you're definitely going more towards one direction, not quite down the middle.
Yeah, and there were just other minor problems I had with this episode, like her talking about not being invited to like the high school parties and stuff. But it's like, okay, we've already shown that your boyfriend that the show just decides to ignore, even though Walter is the best character on the show and he's who I put in the thumbnail to represent the show this week. So it's like her boyfriend is one of the more popular guys in the school that they've already shown. So I'm not really buying that she's not invited to these high school parties because she would be invited through him. And then also the whole like, oh, she's not invited to the adult things. It's like they've also shown in the episode where she wanted to learn to drive so she could drive to the after work functions that she was invited to. So they're breaking the goddamn Doogie Kamealoha canon here, okay?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if they expected a podcast to come and check them every week on their storyline continuity.
I'm just saying, you
But
know.
look, I mean, I saw what she's like. You go to the adult functions, but you're not going to all the adult functions.
Yeah,
You know, like if they're going out to the bars and stuff like that, they're not going to be bringing her along with her.
yeah.
And
She should
I
just get a
I understand.
fake. You know, who didn't have a fake at
Yeah,
16?
and she's a doctor. She looks confident walking in there. You know, that I would buy her as 21. You know, the Disney Plus show's got to get more edgy. You know, make your main characters
Boy
drink
Meets World
underage
had a
and stuff.
drinking episode. Doogie Kamealoha needs a drinking episode.
Yeah, we'll talk about a show in a few minutes that I thought Disney did a good job kind of pushing the boundaries and
Yeah.
being more about serious things than they otherwise would have been. And I like that this show was doing that. I hope that this is not the direction they go, and I hope they're not just going to be more and more and more like about the kid storylines, not about the rest of it. So I hope that this is kind of a one-off or a fluke, and not the direction this whole series is going to go from here.
Yeah, I mean, I think it will probably, hopefully, just be. And it's not. I feel like I've been harping too much on this episode. It's just we've been praising it so much, and it deserves the praise. And this episode was still entertaining and good. It was just there were only a few moments here and there where I was like, oh, this show is definitely like made for young teens and not a 28-year-old dude. All right.
Yeah, I feel that dissonance once in a while, but I still
Yeah.
thought the heart was there for this
Yeah.
episode, and I thought the characters are as always charming,
Yeah. The
and it
dad's the
was
best.
nice.
I want a
It,
dad. Can we get a dad and Walter like side episode?
I'd be doing that. I would like that to happen. You know, I thought it was good for this episode to get more from that brother, the sidelined kind of character. So I'd be down for like a Dad Walter episode. Give us a spin off, you know, a spin off episode, a little bottle episode about the
Yeah.
two of them.
Yep. All right, you ready to move on to our next topic?
Let's go, Joe. What's next?
All right, so we had a trailer release. This is a franchise that's been around for a while. We've seen this character. We've seen this franchise in movie form before. It's like a little bit of a revenge was focused on this trailer. This character using weapons to fight against the bad guys. A lot of heavy action. And no, I'm not talking about Hawkeye. I'm talking about Home Sweet Home Alone, a nice Christmas themed movie that I've kind of felt like this movie is just going to be a shot-for-shot remake of the original Home Alone, but instead of Macaulay Culkin, we're getting Archie Yates, who people might know if they've seen Jojo Rabbit. He was kind of the main friend in that movie. And then I think Rob Delaney and Ellie Kemper are the two main bad guys instead of Daniel Stern and Joe Pesci. But other than that, they gave me nothing that makes me feel like this was new in any way, shape, or form, or any kind of way updated to the 21st century with 21st century technology, which I felt could have been interesting and different and like a reason to remake this. But I'm not one of those people that's like, oh, they ruined my childhood, because I can just either A, not watch it, or B, watch it and be like, yeah, anytime I feel like watching Home Alone, I'm going to watch the original with Macaulay Culkin instead of this one. But yeah, I felt if we didn't have this show where we reviewed Disney Plus content, I probably would have zero desire to watch the movie based on this trailer. And what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I like the original Home Alone. It's been one that, of course, I've seen so many times across the years of Christmas. It's like the staple of Christmas TV movie, and even the sequel I kind of watched a lot. The New York one, I watched that a good amount when I was a kid. So I have some nostalgia for this franchise. So I'm down for like a revival of it with a new actor. And Archie Yates could be a funny guy for it too. And I like Ellie Kemper. I think she's been really funny on TV. So theoretically, I think this could be a really fun one. But yeah, this trailer it looks like the exact premise of Home Alone just done again, and I don't know. I mean, what else I expected, but it it just doesn't seem to add much. It's very much exactly like okay, Ellie Kemper and her husband, they break into this house, and the kid's stuck there home alone, and he gets these elaborate traps and tries to fight them off, and it seems very much focused on the hijinks and like the falling down and the guy getting hit in the face and and like that kind of stuff. So maybe it'll be a fun one to get really drunk and watch guys fall over. And I think like maybe I'll enjoy it in that regard. Like if it's kind of fun in a way to just see like dumb slapstick comedy sometimes. But yeah, not great for me. I'm down to watch it, especially because of the show. But yeah, I'm not expecting a ton. It seems like one of those they drop it on Disney Plus and then like a month later, no one even knows that it
A
exists
month?
at
You're
all.
gonna give it a month before people forget this was released? I give it, so it just drops on Disney Plus Day, November 12th. I give it to the end of that weekend, so November 14th. I give it till November 14th until people will forget that it released on Disney Plus.
And it could come out and surprise us, but I just don't think that it will. But like I said, I imagine it'll be a nice, fun watch a guy fall over and hit his head a few times. I don't know if that's the type of idiocracy entertainment I need, but hey, not everything needs to be genius.
Yeah. Yeah, well, what are you going to do? Maybe it's one of those things where every similarity to the original they put in the trailer to remind people, and it's actually a very different movie, but I'm going to go out on a limb and say I doubt it. One of the cool things is I guess this movie does exist in the same universe as the original Home Alone, because if you noticed, Devin Ratray, who plays Buzz uh, in the original, appeared in this movie as a police officer, and his name badge said McAllister. So I guess Buzz grew up to be a cop, and he's going to be the cop in that investigates the house in this movie. So maybe there's a difference. Maybe Buzz is like, oh, something like this happened to my brother, and he said the cops ignored him, so I'm not going to ignore this kid, and we get Buzz and Archie Yates teaming up against the bad guys. Or he appears for 10 seconds, says, yeah, everything looks okay, and leaves.
Reminds me of something that happened to me a few years ago.
Yeah,
Looks in the camera, walks away.
exactly.
How much money would Disney have to pay to get Macaulay Culkin to come back, for even for a single second?
See, I see Macaulay Culkin more showing up in that like Ryan Reynolds spin-off that or like adaptation that they're talking about a guy that gets like super high and then it happens instead of being a kid. Like I could see Macaulay Culkin showing up as like a pizza delivery man in that movie more than this movie.
Yeah, this feels like embarrassing filler kind of stuff, and Macaulay Culkin I think has got an interesting personality. He's kind of among like the cult film kind of uh, internet space. So I think you'd have a fun time being that more slapstick take it more than this where it's just like, oh, Home Alone, eat this, like here,
Yeah.
have it again.
Yeah, but Macaulay Culkin's a dad now, so maybe he wants to, do a more modern movie for to be in for his son or daughter. I don't know what kind of kid he had to watch, but yeah, shout out to Macaulay Culkin and Brenda Song having a kid. Who saw
He should
that
show
coming?
up. He should show up in Doogie Kamealoha as himself, and then he has to get Doogie to fix his leg or something.
Yeah.
A nice crossover there.
Oh, the Christmas episode of Doogie Kamealoha should be someone broke into the hospital and Macaulay Culkin cameos in the episode, but as an adult Kevin McAllister, and he and Doogie Kamealoha have to team up to beat the bad guys that break into the hospital.
We write the show for him, Joe.
Yep,
Come on,
there we
guys.
go. That should be the episode. All right, ready for our final topic? And if anyone asks, how come you're not covering the Hawkeye trailer? It's because they basically recut the previous trailer down to a minute and a half and re-released it as a new trailer, and I was like, oh, I thought I saw this already. But
I've
yeah,
seen that one.
that's if anyone asks why aren't we covering it, that's why, because they repackaged what we already saw and told us it's new. So
I can't wait to watch it though.
yeah, I mean, looks good still, but no reason about talking about stuff we have already talked about. So moving on to our final topic of the day. Oh, one thing I will bring up though real quick is it was announced that Hawkeye is debuting its first two episodes on the same day. I believe November 24th is its premiere date. So basically, no longer will Boba Fett and Hawkeye overlap each other by a day. So Hawkeye will end a week earlier, and then Boba Fett will premiere. So it will end December 22nd. Book of Boba Fett will premiere December 29th. All right.
I,
Just
I love
wanted to
myself a 2 hour premiere.
Just wanted to clarify that really quick. And then moving on to our final topic. So throughout the month of Halloween, or throughout the month of October, which is the month of Halloween, we wanted to do flashbacks on various movies or various shows on Disney Plus that are kind of this Halloween themed. Last week, Tristan watched Phantom of the Megaplex for the first time and reviewed it, and we needed something else. And I figured with Just Beyond premiering, and it was kind of this anthology show, kind of in the style of maybe like a Twilight Zone. I decided, hey, let's talk about So Weird, a show that I think was really good that's mostly forgotten about. And if Just Beyond is a kind of modern reimagining or kind of a show in the style of the Twilight Zone, I think So Weird is very much the child or kid answer to the X-Files. X-Files was super popular right around this time, and the people at Disney were like, oh, we need a version of this. And it's like, how about we do a show of this young girl going around looking at paranormal and weird occurrences? And then you have the similar dynamic with, she's the big believer, and then her brother is this big skeptic that doesn't believe it's all real. And she's touring around in her mom's, her mom's a rock star played by Mackenzie Phillips, daughter of one of the members of the Mamas and the Papas, and she has a rock band, and that's kind of how they get to see all of these weird and strange occurrences all around the country as they're touring in their mom's rock and roll tour bus, and you see all of these different weird episodes. Tristan, any of them stand out to you that you remember?
I don't remember any specific episodes, but I just remember watching these all the time. Like it was one of those because I went to a school and I had to wait like 3-4 hours for my parents to get me after school when I was a kid. So I had to go to this after school program in the school where we kind of just essentially sat there and and filled our time until our parents could show up and get us. And this was a show we watched constantly at the after school program. So it was always something I watched in the background. I remember looking up and being terrified by so many of these creatures. And I can't remember the exact episode, but there's some kind of like an alien invading creature type of thing that comes into one of these episodes, and it like scarred me so much as a child. And it's one of the things I always remember as like one of the reasons I was afraid to watch horror for a long time into my adulthood, because when I was a kid I watched stuff like this and stuff like Goosebumps, and it all stuck in my head as like too scary for Tristan. So I always remember as soon as trailers for this came on, I'd be like, oh nope, not watching that. No. So I've seen episodes here and there. I definitely went back and watched a few before this week, and I was impressed by it a lot. It's something that I think if I had sat and watched it, I might have liked it a lot. But I was very sensitive to scary stuff when I was a kid. I didn't get into horror much until I was in my teen years. So this is one that I watched through my covered eyes at school a lot. And like you said, the X-Files connections are definitely there. And I've seen all of the X-Files, and you also get the connections to Goosebumps, the connections to Are You Afraid of the Dark. Disney was definitely trying to get like their kind of version of that. And I looked up a lot of some of the story behind them making the show, and that was definitely on their mind. They brought in people on the pilot and said, make this darker, make this more of a horror show. And I went through and watched a bunch of random episodes here and there, and I was very impressed by how mature the show got for a Disney show, and it dealt directly with like death and like is there life after death or is there not in a couple episodes, and like those are themes we don't think of when we think of Disney shows. When I think of Disney shows, I think of Hannah Montana and stuff like that. That's kind of hollow, and this was
Hey,
more
you
than
take
that.
that back.
Look, I wish I could time travel back in time and watch this as a kid. It might be one that I end up getting through more and more of it because I liked what I saw, so I'd be into even finishing out this series.
Yeah, so this was a show I definitely watched a lot as a kid growing up when it was on, and then for recently around the time I started in college, Disney started re-airing a lot of like their old shows at like midnight, kind of like their own version of Adult Swim type of deal, where it's like, okay, young kids aren't awake anymore. Why are we re-airing a episode of Lab Rats or whatever shows are new on Disney Channel that I don't know. Like Lab Rats is, I don't even know what that show is. I just know it exists. But like they realized, oh, like who's awake? College students. So why don't we air the shows that they grew up with? But anyway, So Weird just kind of fell through the cracks. It was a lot of Lizzie McGuire, Kim Possible, The Proud Family were a lot of those shows that they decided to re-air. And it was a show I remember loving. And then obviously when Disney Plus came out, the very first thing I ever watched on Disney Plus was So Weird. I watched like 10 episodes of So Weird before I even started The Mandalorian. And then watched the first episode of Mandalorian and I binged through all of the rest of So Weird. And I was, happily surprised by how good it still was even as, an adult. And two of the main episodes that stood out for me was this episode, James Garr, about this teacher who had been cryogenically frozen, and when he got thawed out, his soul had essentially like left his body. Like his brain was still there, and he could think, but he referred to himself in the third person, and he was just like this really weird, unemotional guy. And it was kind of this interesting episode about the difference between like having a soul and being alive and that whole aspect. And then that was interesting. And this other one called Roswell.
I
Um,
wanted to mention Roswell as well. That's one that stood out to me as a
Roswell,
memorable one.
yeah, Roswell was one where it kind of starts in this flashback of this kid whose dad worked in like the Air Force or something, and he brought back this chest of stuff home, and he's like, "Don't touch this stuff. This stuff's not for you. Don't open this chest. Don't look in this chest." And the kid, obviously being a little kid, opens the chest and finds this like radio, and then cut to like modern times, and this guy's like, and I want to look up his name, the actor's name, because there is an interesting connection with the actor. He starred in the television show as the Martian in My Favorite Martian, like back in the '60s.
Oh
Um,
wow.
the like older crazy guy, and so that was kind of the connection there. I unfortunately can't find the actor's name, but um, his name was Andrew in the episode. Oh, Tom Heaton. Tom Heaton, who played the Martian in My Favorite Martian, and then obviously in this episode, he just is holding this box to his ear the whole time, and he's like, "Oh, they're talking to me," and he has like this weird obsession with his dad, and it's just kind of this weird, kind of almost like depressing episode about this guy who everyone believes lost his mind because he thinks the aliens are talking to him.
Yeah, I want to mention too that there was a cool through line of this show. Like the X Files was known for having its like mystery of the week episodes, and also having its mythology that ran through it and was like their long running mystery, which was like what happened to Mulder's sister essentially. And the question of this is what happened to Phi's father. So the main character's father has this like mysterious death that she's trying to investigate throughout the show. So I thought that was interesting as well that this Disney show had the uh, the courage to do kind of like a through line storyline because that's not something you typically would get out of these kind of shows. Like Disney doesn't want kids to have to watch in order and follow a plot. The whole point's that you're going to watch in a syndication at some random point. So it was cool that they gave the writers the freedom to have that storyline to also make it something we mentioned in Just Beyond that it engaged with kid themes, but not in like kiddie ways. And I think this show does the same thing. It engages with the death of the main character's father. Like you said, it engages with kind of like what does it mean to have a soul And there's a lot of stuff like that where they were able to capture themes that are more mature than stuff that was on the channel around it. And because it was genre, they were able to kind of get around that kind of stuff. I also did read some stories too about like certain storylines. Disney was like, we can't do that. That's too far. But there were, for the most part, they were pretty hands off. And you can tell when you watch the show how much freedom they had to just do weird stuff with it.
Yep. Yeah, it's a good, solid show. Anything else you want to talk about or bring up as far as
I
Disney
thought it
Plus
was
goes?
a. I want to give a quick question here for you, Joe, because we watched this and we also watched Just Beyond, when I think we both mentioned how they kind of go hand in hand with each other. Uh, so how do you think this feels as like a response to, like, is this as mature Just Beyond? Do you think Just Beyond is less or more mature than this? Like, do you think that?
I feel like they're pretty on par with each other. I feel like they're pretty similar. It's also hard. I haven't quite finished it, but from what I've seen, I would say they're pretty close to each other.
Yeah, because I think it's interesting that like this was so many decades ago, but I think it in some ways is a bit more mature than Just Beyond, but also like Just Beyond is stylistically more advanced and it's obviously higher budget and that kind of a
Yep.
thing. But yeah, I think that it shows that even like we think of Disney as like this really controlled, censored kind of environment where nothing creative or interesting comes out of them, but it did, like we see shows like So Weird that are so weird and you would never think would be a Disney show, but Disney Plus, I like it because it's given me a chance to go back and give Disney credit for some of the stuff that I otherwise would have probably never seen.
Yeah. We need a So Weird reboot, you know?
Look, I would love a So Weird reboot. We got to get some horror out there for the kids. We got Just Beyond, but we got to get some X Files kind of stuff out there. Teach them to go solve the mysteries,
Oh, and I will
solve
say,
mysteries.
Eric Von Detten, who people might know from Brink or as the voice of Sid, is in from Toy Story, is in season one of uh, of So Weird, and then season 2 and 3. If you're a Blake Lively fan, we got Blake Lively's brother comes in season 2 and 3. So
If you're a Blake Lively fan, you got her brother in this one.
yeah, who doesn't love Blake Lively's brother? You know,
Yeah, I'd go for that. If you're a Stephen Amell fan, look, you got Robbie Mel in this one. It's just the same. It's pretty much the same.
yeah, All right. Anything else you got to say about Disney Plus this week?
No, it was a fun week. I love the horror going on here, Joe. Good pick for So Weird. I'm excited that it was your pick, so I was happy to watch it.
All right, yeah. All right. We'll be back next week to talk more Disney Plus. We'll be talking more Doogie Kamealoha and whatever else this happens to drop. So, without further ado, goodbye.
Hey, thank you for watching the Movie Change Up podcast. We'd really appreciate if you liked, commented, subscribed, and shared us with anyone you think might be into what we're doing over here. Thank you. Have a nice day.